Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Sadlier School Live. My name is Camberly Woods, and I'm so excited to bring Ellen Edmonds back with us today. Hello, Ellen.
Hi.
Ellen and I are super excited to be on here with you guys today to share some fun ways that you can make vocabulary engaging at home. And before we dive into today's topic, I want to encourage any of you who are watching us live, or maybe you're watching the replay, to just drop a comment. Let us know you're there. Tell us hello, and let's all connect together. So, Ellen, let's kind of start to talk about today's topic and why vocabulary instruction at home in this time is important to do, and what are some of the simple ways we can integrate it into our daily routines with our students or the kids that we might be taking care of.
If you've ever had a conversation with me, you know that vocabulary is something I have really strong feelings about. Vocabulary is so important to students' academic success. It's important to our life success. And students, children should be growing their vocabulary in really exponential ways across a year. So our fourth graders should be learning 3,000 or so words in a year. We can't stop focusing on vocabulary just because we're learning at home.
Yep.
And we can learn vocabulary our whole lives unless we have a cognitive impairment. So as adults, we can be building our vocabulary too. It can be a family or a classroom focus, and it's certainly going to make a difference in success. And we learn vocabulary in math, we learn vocabulary in science, we learn vocabulary in religion, we learn vocabulary in technology, in all aspects of life, not just English language arts. And families are a great place, homes are a great place to really spend some time thinking about vocabulary and doing some fun things with vocabulary so our children, our students are word conscious, word aware.
I think you bring up a really good point, and that's the fact that in all of these subject areas, we have vocabulary that is important for us to know so that we can actually understand that topic. Like you're saying, with math, there are certain terms that we need to know to truly develop an understanding of the mathematics we are learning. And so vocabulary is super important. And at the same time, it makes our conversations and our stories so much fun when we can, add in that little vocabulary word that just adds emphasis to it. So,
it's so easy when we are not really trying to use words that I like to call lazy words, to say said or say went, when there's another word that's more precise, that's more descriptive, and calling each other on it and saying, hey, that's a lazy word, what's another word you might use? And it gets to be fun if you're watching a movie or watching television or watching your favorite sports person talk, to say, what's a synonym for that word? Or was there anything in their conversation or their talk that was lazy that could have used a word that we know that would have more precisely described what they wanted? So
okay,
really
I love that idea.
Yeah, I just think that we know that when we have conversations at home, when we have those rich back and forth, we move from using vocabulary about concrete things to vocabulary about abstract. If you're an educator, you call those tier 2 words. Those are classroom words, education words, words that literate people use, mature conversationalists, mature individuals in terms of their language use. And those tier 2 words are words that are really critical to academic success. A word like hypothesis is one that's used in lots of different content areas, and it's a good word for a student to know. It's important to know those domain-specific words, the math and the science words, but there are a lot of words that are words that we use in academic settings across all of those areas. And sometimes as adults, the parents of children, or as teachers, we forget to use those words that are more descriptive and more robust. And so we need to be using those. And there's so many things that we can do at home that are fun to build vocabulary. And there are things that we can do to emphasize what was sent home or what's being done virtually. So if there are vocabulary words that are being used then we should have conversations at home about those. Can you explain that word to me in your own language? Can you tell me why that word's relevant to you? Can you draw a picture or model something in clay or draw something in chalk on the sidewalk, or use some of the really sophisticated technology tools to diagram or draw it and represent that word with something visual, because that helps us remember that word. So those are important. That conversation about a word really deepens our understanding of words, and so it's a great way to reinforce it.
And I think that's the key there, is it's the conversation. And throughout the day when I'm having conversations with my kids, especially now that they're out of school, I'm trying to have a heightened awareness of the words I'm using. And sometimes you use little words, like I think we actually used the word hypotheses the other day. And so then you're like, okay, do you know what that is? Like, let's just check really quick. Is that a word you understand? Do we need to talk about it? And just really honing in on that with the kids, it's made it so that now they're stopping in conversations and saying, wait, I don't really know that word. Can you explain that word to me? And so that's now shifted to where they're asking us about words just organically in conversation.
That's great. You know, with younger children in our families, we can always make the refrigerator the word wall, like the classroom word wall. And that reminds us to use those words, to talk about those words. It reminds them to use them in conversation and in writing. You know, we need 12 to 14 exposures to words in lots of different contexts to learn those words. And so reminding us to use those words is helpful. And it is great as we encounter unfamiliar words to stop and say, you know, I think sometimes when we ask a child, kind of put them on the spot, do you know what that means? You know, that maybe they don't really, but, you know, can we look at or think about the context it was used in? Is there anything there that's a clue? Do we know the prefix? Do we know the suffix? Is there something about that word family that might help us understand that word? And we can always pull out a glossary or a dictionary and look those words up, but then let's not use that language. Let's put that into language that would be language we would use to describe that word. And it really is about being able to explain the word, pronounce the word. It's, you know, if you're not clear on the pronunciation, you can always go to your computer or your phone and have it pronounced for you, which is really important. You know, I was explaining to some folks yesterday that there are a lot of words that are hard for us, and sometimes it's about the way a word is pronounced. So the word indefatigable to me is a mouthful. So that was a hard word for me to learn. The meaning of it didn't make sense to me with my knowledge of Greek and Latin roots and French. And that was part of it. But a lot of it was just trying to get that mouthful of a word out. So the saying those words is helpful.
I love all these tips. And I want to stop you really quick because we have a comment here from Mathman Todd. Hi, Math. Or Mathman Todd. Actually, you might have been Von Michael Mathman Todd. So sorry if I'm butchering your name. But the tip that he's giving is, yes, and also you can use the magnets on the fridge and build prefixes and roots.
What a great idea.
Also using Scrabble tiles too. Those are great tools around the house that you could fold into learning as
What a good idea. Manipulatives are really very helpful. And so that's a great idea. And, you know, there are some very common prefixes and suffixes, and taking the time to learn those helps us be able to understand unfamiliar words. So that's something that any of us can work on while we're not in the typical classroom setting. And I think that's helpful.
Yeah. Also, I just want to let everybody watching know that on weekdays on Sadlier School's social media channels, here on Facebook, also on Instagram, we share daily vocabulary words. So if you're trying to find some different words that you can use with your kids, your students, that might be a tool for you to access. And I'll drop links to that in the chat as we are talking through all of this.
Yeah, that's really a great idea. And the more we use and model those words, the more everybody in the home environment also will use those words. So, you know, I think if we can do something to reward each other, so we can keep a chart and put stars by our names when we've used the words that we are focusing on in a week or two. So, you know, focusing across 2 weeks on a few words as a family is kind of a nice thing to do, and making sure we're using those words as we're having dinner conversations, as we're preparing meals, as we're sitting down together and watching a movie on a Friday night. All of those will help us.
And that has been something we've really tried to do every night at dinner, is have conversations about vocabulary words, because we feel like that's a really good time to integrate that into our daily schedule. And we go back through and we're like, hey, what are some of those words that we've talked about recently? Or what's the new amazing word you can stump me with? Like, tell me something you've heard. And I love your idea, Ellen, of even just saying, hey, that's a lazy word. Or did you notice on Fuller House when you were watching it, like in this little segment, what were some words they used that were lazy that we could jazz up and make more exciting? Oh, we have another comment here from Von Michael, Mathman Todd, saying the sounding and phonetics also can extend to the stress marks on words. I print out words and have my family use sunflower seeds to stress marks. Oh, that's an awesome idea.
It's interesting. The relationship of phonics and vocabulary and comprehension is really clear. And so as we're learning to decode words, building our vocabulary and mapping those two things together makes us more fluent. Our word recognition really increases. And the more fluent we are as readers, the more we can focus on reading comprehension. So, one of the reasons vocabulary is so important is that we can't comprehend text if we don't understand the meaning of the words in the text. And so getting our children's vocabulary to be a richer vocabulary, a deeper vocabulary, and to understand the words more deeply increases their ability to understand the text. But it is also important, particularly in the early grades, to map it to what they're learning in terms of phonics. So that's another great idea to do that.
Yes, I love that.
Graphic organizers are really helpful on our vocabulary workshop pages. We have some graphic organizers in the family section that are available at no cost to our customers and non-customers. And my favorite happens to be the word square. And to be able to use that and fill that out is a great thing as we are starting to learn new words.
So, and those are all on Sadlier Connect, right?
Yes, they're all on Sadlier.
I'm going to drop a link to that in the chat for you guys if you want to access those free tools that Ellen's mentioning right now.
So, I think that there are lots of different ways that we can learn words. We know that we need to talk about words. We need to be able to explain words in our own language. We need to be able to pronounce those words. We need to be able to use them in meaningful sentences. And that's a trick, because in the old days, when I was taught vocabulary, the teacher would give us a list on Monday. We were supposed to look those words up in the dictionary and write down the definitions and then use them in a sentence and be tested. And that's not really effective vocabulary learning. We need to have many opportunities to engage with those words in different contexts. And we need to be able to really understand the word so that the sentence isn't just a rote sentence, but really a meaningful sentence. And as we're doing that kind of work with vocabulary, one of the things I like to remind us is that playing games with vocabulary is really important. Marzano tells us that routine game playing increases our acquisition of vocabulary. So that's an important tool. Technology can also be a big bonus in learning vocabulary.
Yeah, and we have a bunch of different games and activities that actually help with this. There are some really great ideas on Vocab Gal's blog articles, and there's a few activities you and I, Ellen, discussed before this chat that we thought would be fun activities to point you guys to, and I'm going to drop them into the chat. I don't know if you want to briefly describe those two activities.
So there are two that I thought of right off the bat that I thought were really helpful in this time. So one of them is a Color Me vocabulary that would be really appropriate for younger children and younger students. And that will allow them to label and color at the same time, helping our young students learn vocabulary for things that they're seeing in their world. Building that basic vocabulary is important, as well as their tier 2 vocabulary. And then there's a fun one that appeals to all ages and all orientations in terms of the way we think about things. And that is the car ad, and it's an opportunity to describe the car that you want to design, and it can be as sophisticated as you want it to be. There are cars provided, but you could draw or create your own car and describe that car and label that car with a vocabulary word for the name. We know that that's what all of the big car producers do, is come up with a name that they think makes us all want to have that car. So name the car and then describe that car with rich language that would make anyone want to purchase your car that you're designing.
And this just had me thinking as we were sitting here, but Vocab Gal and I were on Sadlier School Live a week ago, and we were talking through how you can virtually play some of these vocabulary games with your family, so that, you know, your kids don't have to see your face all the time. And one of the games her and I digitally played while we were on live was using the Apples to Apples game card. And so I'll drop a link to that in this chat as well. So if you guys are interested in checking that out, it was super, super fun. And it's an easy way to give them that vocabulary practice. And at the same time, they're having fun and they're connecting with friends and family that they can't see face to face right now.
Yeah, she has really great games for all ages, and a lot of games that are modifications of games that we might have at home. And I know most of us are pulling out games right now. We're doing puzzles and we're doing lots of things that allow us to use vocabulary. So I think we just need to be using vocabulary words again and again. As we're reading, we need to talk about those words. As we're in conversation, we need to really focus on the words we're using. As we're doing kinds of activities like baking and cleaning, we need to be using vocabulary also. Everyone's learned the word sanitize and sanitizer, and there are lots of vocabulary words that are in our language right now that maybe we're not typically in our language, and that's a great way to really introduce our family members to new words. So
yes, I love it. Use what's happening in real life and apply it to your learning. I think that's so smart. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Ellen. As I mentioned, the different links that we've chatted about today have been added to the chat. If you did watch us live or watched us in the replay, let us know, say hello. And if there are future topics you would like us to discuss here on Sadlier School Live, let us know, because a lot of our bright ideas come from people like you. So thank you again, Ellen, for being here.
Thank you.
And we will be back on Monday at 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern, 12 o'clock Pacific, and I hope to see you all there. Bye.
Have a great weekend. Bye.